thank you all for attending today. We wanted to offer you a session that would help you with some of the biggest issues that folks experience or need to address when implementing Office 365, and that's really around identity management. And I wanted to put together a session. We wanted to put together a session to address those and provide you some insight to potential solutions to help really address that and simplify your IT lives. With me, as Emily mentioned, is Victor Mux, and he'll be commentating throughout the presentation as well. With that, I wanted to just move to the next slide and do a quick poll to really identify what your role is with regard to your job. What's your job role? We'll pause for a couple of seconds for that to gather. Okay, so we're going to kind of move right on into it. This is results from our poll. We do have a bit of a mix, but it's great to see that we have mostly technical folks online. Our session will focus on more of the technical side, but certainly from a director management and sales side, these are going to be this is going to be information that I hope will prove to be valuable to everyone and not too deeply technical for too many folks. Okay, so with that, let's kind of get into it. So when we look at the world of devices and software as a solution, or SaaS applications today, I think we all can identify and experience that there is just an absolute proliferation of identities and solutions that exist out there, from private clouds on premises to public clouds to private sites and so on. That is kind of what we're focused on today with identity management. But the real issue is the enterprise challenges. You know, managing that identity and the password proliferation, I can't say that word today, not twice in a row anyway, the need for that single sign-on or single authentication experience across all the resources, on-premises, in the cloud, public software as a solution services, and even private, you know, like a LinkedIn or a Facebook, if in fact IT is willing to allow that kind of connectivity. So, you know, from an IT perspective, we need to know who is accessing what on that public cloud. As you know, departments are, you know, the business is kind of going around IT and securing cloud solutions. So how do we embrace that and ensure that we provide a layer of security so that we don't have federation fatigue throughout? So I really wanted to start with what is Azure Active Directory, because there's a common misunderstanding that Azure Active Directory replaces Windows Server Active Directory. And in fact, it does not. They are different. So I wanted to give a quick overview around what Azure Active Directory is and the solutions that it can help resolve. So obviously we talked in the beginning, there's many applications. Azure Active Directory can become a single repository for those cloud solutions, those many applications. Managing identities and access to all those different clouds. The ability to monitor and protect via security with enterprise applications, on-premises applications, So Azure Active Directory can make that connectivity and protect that. And then I mentioned also earlier LinkedIn or Facebook, like the ability for a user to actually do self-service capabilities and even have a portal to add their own applications as well. But also the ability to synchronize their password, do self-service kind of change aspects of their identity, like their mobile phone number, that IT would give them the ability to do. So when we look at this from a broader perspective, and I apologize, I went back just a little bit. My build didn't work, so bear with me 1 second as it does build. So when we looked at the solution to help address this broad identity challenge, I mentioned that Azure Active Directory is different from Windows Server Active Directory, and we want IT to be able to control the identities that synchronize with Azure Active Directory to provide that federated single sign-on kind of capability. So this presentation is focused around making that connection and enabling that connection in Azure, not Azure Active Directory, but actually hosting a solution in Azure Infrastructure as a Service that can provide you a global connectivity to Azure Active Directory. So in essence, we're synchronizing with your Active Directory and providing the capability through Azure Active Directory to make connectivity to other cloud solutions, your internal line of business custom applications, consumer identities, Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as software as a service solutions, Google, Yahoo, other type of cloud service solutions. So this solution would enable you to make that kind of connectivity. And from an Azure perspective, with Azure Active Directory Premium, there are over 2,400 pre-integrated apps in the application gallery. Okay, so there are already connectors that exist out there, and you can just simply click on it and connect and provide that single sign-on kind of capability, or federated identity, if you will. So we wanted to gather a little information as well to identify what your organization is doing today. What technologies are in use? Are you leveraging Office 365? Are you working with both Office 365 and Azure, Azure as an infrastructure or platform as a service solution? Or if you're not working with either one, to just try and get a gauge of your experience with these technologies today. Great. So it's good. I'm seeing that we have a very good mix of results here. A lot of you, 56%, are actually running Office 365 only. So the good news for you is that the back end that supports Office 365, as you already know, is Azure Active Directory, the free version, right? So when you link to the Azure portal, you see 3 menu items on the left. Some folks are using Office 365 and Azure. In that combination, it's Office 365 as a productivity solution, and Azure, which can be leveraged as infrastructure as a service, as well as platform as a service. And then it's good to know, too, that there are actually a mix of folks, about 28%, that are not running either. So this should help you identify how you can architect a solution that could address this identity challenge. The other thing I want to mention and add is with Azure Active Directory, specifically there are 3 different versions or forms, if you will, of Azure Active Directory. There's the free version. That's the back end for Office 365. There is a basic version that will give you connectivity for up to 10 SaaS applications. And then there's the Premium Edition. And the Premium Edition includes features like multi-factor authentication. Azure offers multi-factor authentication as a single solution. If you're not familiar with multi-factor authentication, in essence, it's the user providing an additional layer of security or form of communication to verify that they are, in fact, who they say they are. So when you sign up for Azure or cloud services, typically you'll get a prompt that says, we want to send you a text message or call you on the phone and give you a code. So it verifies that you are, in fact, the person who is accessing this solution. This is enabled through cloud applications with SAML and can be enabled in other forms. Multi-factor authentication, by the way, can be an on-premises solution implemented with your servers on-prem. It can also be a solution that is integrated and implemented out of Azure Active Directory, Azure Active Directory Premium. So Premium multi-factor authentication is included, or you can just buy a subset and add that additional layer of authentication. When you have users that are logging in from laptops or tablet devices, their desktops, cell phone, and so on, you can add this second layer of security to identify that user and their right to access your solutions, your infrastructure. When you move that to the cloud, it in essence replaces the requirement for on-premises infrastructure. That doesn't mean that IT goes away. IT is absolutely essential to enabling this and ongoing managing this. But what it does do from a business perspective is help you transition your costs, if you will. So it will eliminate the electricity costs, the HVAC. I usually refer to data center as real estate. I have to buy a building and put stuff in it, right? If I have a dedicated data center, then I've got security cards, and I have to think about security like biometrics, who can get in there. So when you look at cloud solutions or hosting infrastructure solutions in the cloud, it helps offset those costs and move them from capital expenditures that you depreciate over a number of years to operational expense that is an ongoing budgetary expense. So it's easier to account for it and then take advantage of new solutions because you don't have to make a large capital expense that you have to write off the books for a number of years. This single sign-on or multi-factor can also be coded in Azure because Azure is an open platform. Microsoft changed the name from Windows Azure to Microsoft Azure because in Azure Infrastructure as a Service, you can host Linux virtual machines, up to 5 different distributions of Linux, SQL databases, Oracle databases, a plethora of development tools, .NET, Java, PHP, Ruby, Python, Node.js. The list just kind of goes on. Recently, Microsoft even signed agreements with SAP to host SAP ERP systems in the cloud, as well as IBM and so on. So it is very much an open platform. But identity is the control point for access to all of these corporate assets, I'll say. So for instance, with regard to a Microsoft platform, we're talking about Office 365. That's your productivity platform. Dynamics is kind of in that group as well. So Dynamics CRM, Customer Relationship Management, that's in the productivity side alongside Office 365. Intune is really in, I'll call it, the management side. So Intune is a solution that will allow you to manage non-domain joined assets, iPads, so tablets or mobile phones or other non-domain assets. Could be a laptop as well. Also, that identity exists behind your firewall with your custom apps or even a non-Microsoft cloud-based SaaS app, as we've been talking about. Active Directory is kind of your control point. Azure Active Directory is the glue that makes it all happen, but you want to manage identities through Windows Server Active Directory because you likely, in an identity management environment, have connected other dissimilar systems, other directories that are on premises with Active Directory, like the phone system, or maybe if there's an NIS directory for Linux or Unix kind of systems. And then I mentioned also the PCs and devices. We've got people accessing data, applications, and resources from just a plethora of different areas. And how do you manage all that? You manage that in the center with Azure Active Directory. Active Directory on-prem, Azure Active Directory allows you to, in essence, synchronize these identities, move changes and push changes, and integrate the cloud, integrate your on-premises identities that are being stored and managed with Active Directory, as well as providing a connection point for your mobile devices, PCs, laptops, tablets, and so on. So when we take a look at how we deliver a seamless user authentication experience, in the first sense, we look at it from cloud authentication, right? So user attributes are synchronized with your Windows Server Active Directory, including a password hash. So the authentication is completed against Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. So they don't have to make a complete call all the way back to your Active Directory because you're synchronizing that. Federated authentication synchronizes with Active Directory as well, but besides it just synchronizing, when you're in a federated kind of identity, for instance, for those of you that are using Office 365 and Azure, you notice when you sign in with your work credentials, you put in your user principal name, your email address, and then when you hit Tab to go to the password field, it already knows who you are because your identity is federated. Your directories are federated and linked together, allowing that access without you re-entering a password. So when you hit that tab, you're automatically authenticated. It's verified you are who you are. When you do the directory sync, it's still the same username and the same password, but you have to re-enter the password if you log into Azure Active Directory or if you log into Active Directory. I'm referring to the top portion where we're talking about cloud authentication versus a real federated authentication. When you look at federated identity from a business perspective, take mergers and acquisitions into account. The company that you merged with or acquired more than likely has their own Active Directory environment. Active Directory federated services can federate that identity, in essence, link the directories together so that when your users log on and need to find or access resources in that acquired or federated business, they don't have to re-authenticate because the directories are already connected. And I apologize for the pause. There's just a slow transition for the slide, so I'm trying to pause for that. So, when we look at providing, and I wanted to walk you through kind of this scenario, single sign-on experiences, because there's obviously a number of different solutions. Users, when they log on, they access all their corporate resources when they log into Active Directory. We can control access to applications with Windows Server Active Directory, like SQL. SQL Server, you can authenticate to SQL tables or do NT authentication. So in essence, log into the directory, integrate that with Windows Active Directory. Leverage web services, so like SOAP and Java and REST protocols to make that connectivity. And then also LDAP via PowerShell. All this can be controlled through PowerShell. Again, providing the user the ability to sign on once with one user identity and one password, but link to disparate systems and control access to files or web applications or line of business applications. When we federate that identity with Azure Active Directory, we add the cloud capabilities for that single sign-on experience. Again, the user already authenticated just once, and so they're not prompted to re-enter credentials to access this world of identity basically across the world. They're seamlessly accessing all the resources, whether they are cloud apps, corporate apps, or apps within the Microsoft Cloud solutions like Intune or Office 365. So the way this works and where we're going to go is I'm going to start with a federated architecture that exists on premises. Okay? So a user sits down at their workstation and they enter their credentials, and we have Active Directory federated services, that's ADFS, and DIRSync, directory synchronization, and then a proxy that has the ability to communicate with Azure Active Directory. So that user in the laptop in the upper left can log into Active Directory, and by logging in on premises to Active Directory, they can gain access to Office 365 or Intune. So that's from the corporation out to the cloud. But what if the user is coming from the cloud? Maybe they're on the road, a transient employee traveling in a hotel room or so on. So this is the magic that happens with Azure Active Directory. The user logs in to, in essence, with the same credentials, but they hit Azure Active Directory, which federates or proxies that connection back to Active Directory. There's synchronization between the two that ensures that user isn't going to experience latency by having to go like a proxy connection all the way back to on-prem. Azure Active Directory becomes that central control point where the user's identity is synchronized with Active Directory, so they're constantly talking on a scheduled basis. When you look at a federated architecture on premises, you need a federation server with directory synchronization, and you also need that proxy to make the cloud connection through your DMZ, your demilitarized zone. So something that's sitting behind the firewall, ADFS, and something that's sitting on the outside of the firewall in a DMZ, and that's the proxy. And we're seeing the additional gray boxes because you want to ensure that solution is also properly architected and highly available to ensure that the services are running, right? When you look on-premises, and I will have a chart in a couple of slides, but you scale based on the number of users. So that on-premises infrastructure may in fact require more than one or two Active Directory federated services. You may need a larger number if you're over 1,000 users or over 10,000 users or so on. And I'll have a chart that kind of talks through that in a second. You'll similarly need to size that if we move to Azure as the platform to host this. But Azure will offer you the ability to actually reduce the number of servers, run them in an operational expense. So again, you're not putting out capital expense for hardware, waiting for the procurement cycle for that hardware to ship and arrive on site, and then rack and stack and cable it. You can spin up a virtual machine in Azure Infrastructure as a Service in approximately 5 minutes. As a matter of fact, I've spun up entire SharePoint farms, 10 servers, Active Directory, SQL, front-end webs, application servers, file servers, storage, and so on. An entire SharePoint farm using the Azure Preview portal. It's a newer portal that adds new capability. But that entire SharePoint farm spun up by filling in approximately 10 fields and clicking 3 buttons, and was provisioned and running in an hour and a half. Anybody who's worked with SharePoint knows that that takes a lot longer when you do it on-prem. So in this architecture, when we federate, what we're doing is moving the ADFS, the Active Directory Federated Services, and a Windows Server Active Directory domain controller, as well as the Active Directory Federated Services proxies and directory synchronization, all living in Azure Infrastructure as a Service on virtual machines. This environment can be provisioned very quickly. Again, 5 minutes really to spin up an individual virtual machine. The sizing requirements for virtual machine are relatively small, but again, it depends on what your needs are. So in essence, that user in the lower right corner logging in with their laptop authenticates to, logs in to 365, and they hit a SharePoint site. Well, and there's a reverse proxy for SharePoint because in a hybrid scenario, SharePoint could exist on the corporate network in the lower left, right? So they kind of go through Azure Active Directory, their federated identity via directory sync and federation services, can go through the VPN connection and access SharePoint on-premises by authenticating through Office 365. And this is putting that whole federated architecture up in Azure in a cloud service. So again, now it's an operational expense and not a long-term capital expense that has to depreciate over time. So when we look at sizing, scalability planning for Active Directory Federated Services, less than 1,000 users, you don't really need a dedicated federation server or proxy. You will need a load balancer because you will put Active Directory and a federated services service role, ADFS in Server 2012 R2, and Server 2012 actually is a Windows Server role. It's not a separate server or a separate server installation necessarily. It can actually coexist on your domain controller for less than 1,000 users. When you reach 1,000 to 15,000 users, you want to dedicate 2 federation servers. So that's a server that is it's a Windows Server role that is just running Active Directory Federated Services, not commingling the domain controller on the same server. and you want separate 2 Federation server proxies, and those again sit in the DMZ to make that kind of connection. You will need 2 network load balance servers or services as well, one to load balance the Federation for server proxies, the other to load balance the dedicated Federation servers. Okay? And then if you have 15,000 to 60,000 users, you're going to want to add 2 Federation servers for every additional 15,000 users. Same with the proxies. Okay? There is a link to the TechNet article. I'm pausing here for a moment so that you can grab that, and I think the slides will be available as well after the session.
Yeah. Hey, Mike. I just
Yes.
want to comment real quickly that another way to look at this is, how quickly can I synchronize with my Active Directory to the cloud if I want to have some sort of identity management. So, with DirSync by itself, you're looking at same sign-on with ADFS is single sign-on, which basically means that when somebody's authenticating using ADFS, it's going directly to your Active Directory. When somebody is authenticating using DirSync, they're authenticating in the cloud with Office 365, and it's synchronizing the password and the hash. So that's something that if you're not if you haven't developed any solution yet, the easiest route is to start with DirSync first, and then as your company grows, then I would take a look at ADFS.
Yeah, and actually when we go down this path of federating, ADFS is not the only solution, and we're actually close to the end of the session, and we're going to have a poll to ask about that. But you can leverage other third-party solutions like Centrify or something. ADFS is a role on Windows Server, so it's not necessarily a new Windows Server license. It can coexist, again, on domain controllers, so you can combine roles and therefore keep costs down. But there is an infrastructure that's required around ADFS. Other solutions like Centrify are actually, it's a cloud SaaS type offering that does not require a Federation server architecture. However, it does still require a proxy. So it does reduce the infrastructure requirement by deploying a proxy server on-prem to make that kind of connectivity with your on-premises Active Directory environment. So, and there are definitely other federated solutions out there, or identity federation solutions out there. So with that, we wanted to ask one more identity management question, and that is, what cloud identity management solution are you using today, or do you use? Do you do no federation or identity management? Are you doing, I would assume the folks with Office 365 and Azure are doing ADFS and DirSync. It does not mean that you have to be, though. So we're just wanted to try and identify that. Again, there are certainly a number of solutions that exist out there to provide that kind of identity management. And I will wait a second for the polls to gather data. And I will move on. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So the results are in, and what cloud identity management do you use today? I see none. So, in those scenarios, which is the vast majority, almost 60%, when a user authenticates on-prem, they have to re-authenticate or re-enter their username, password, and such in the cloud. DirSync certainly synchronizes. ADFS is surely providing that federated authentication. And I see others. So, when you think about things like Ping, Federate, or Okta, Centrify, ADFS, these are all solutions that can actually help you unify that access or that user experience. So to ease IT's life and get it under management and control, but more importantly, to reduce help desk calls and simplify the IT, or more importantly, the help desk life when you've got people authenticating to many different resources. With that, we wanted to provide. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just going to say, the easiest route again is DirSync. Since they added the password synchronization with DirSync, that is certainly the easiest way to implement. Sort of the single sign-on, except that you're doing the same password sign-on. But all you need is just a dedicated server, and there's no hardware dependencies, nor do you need like an SSL certificate, so that if that server goes down, you can still authenticate, still access the Office 365 resource. But if you want a lot more granularity in how you authenticate, that's when you want to take a look at ADFS, which gives you a full solution around identity management.
It gives us it certainly does provide the federated identity. But when we talk identity management, that is a bigger, broader topic around true identity management, and that is unifying dissimilar directories. Where in the case of, say, Forefront Identity Manager, or I think it's going to be renamed Microsoft Identity Manager. So when you look at, say, a phone system, I may be Grasso M. In Active Directory, I may be M. Grasso or Michael G. Or something like that. So when you have identity that is structured in different directories, in different formats, or you need to pull information or provision or provide information to dissimilar directories. The phone system, PBX, for example. Again, I may be Grasso M in the phone system, and I have XYZ phone number. Well, Active Directory doesn't really know about that phone number. When I have true identity management, and I can merge or join information from dissimilar directories, I can use a true full-fledged identity management system like Forefront Identity Manager to actually grab the phone number out of the phone system and populate Active Directory. In Forefront Identity Manager, or what again will soon be named Microsoft Identity Manager, it unifies that individual's identity and ensures that we're grabbing or providing specific information that is best suited in the originating directory, or the directory that controls that information, like PBX for the phone system, and your identity in Active Directory, or a line of business application. It also will address conflicts. So let's use John Smith as an example, right? There could be 3 John Smiths or 5 John Smiths. God forbid, I was on a phone call last week and there were 5 Anthonys on the same phone call. That was interesting enough. But when you're trying to manage that as an identity, right, and they're all different people in different states possibly, or have different social security numbers. I mean, you need to authenticate and be able to resolve who that person is based on some unique identifier, which within a corporation, I would say 10 times out of 10 is their HR employee ID number, right? And that's how you kind of make those joins. The identity management solution is the bridge or the glue that connects those dissimilar directories, pulls that information together, and then Federation Server and DirSync is what will help you make that connectivity or connection to Azure Active Directory. If you're doing some research, and actually let me move on to the last slide because we're in our final comments, but if you're doing research online and you look at Azure Active Directory Premium, Azure Active Directory Premium includes a number of features. One of them is actually Microsoft Identity Management. So Azure Active Directory Premium can integrate with your on-premises Forefront Identity Manager or Microsoft Identity Manager to actually aid updating the fields or information about that identity that's stored in Azure Active Directory. So the user can authenticate, again, from a mobile device, from a browser, somewhere in a hotel, or on premises, and ensure that they have the right role-based access to connect and get access to all the information that they have rights to access. With that, I'll leave this slide up for a second. We wanted to make sure that we provided some resources to provide you assistance, so the Active Directory team blog, where they actually talk about this new password write-back feature to sync in a multi-forest type environment. So for those of you that are working with Office 365, if you're in a multi-forest environment, the DirSync and ADFS and Active Directory are evolving to address that multi-forest complexity or challenge. Victor mentioned a moment ago DirSync in the single sign-on scenario, so you can walk through a link there. When you are connecting Office 365 with Azure, you obviously need to own the domain name that you are registering, so company.com. So in your domain registrar, your Office 365 ports and protocols and IPs need to be added there. Part of that is in 365 config. Part of that is in Azure Active Directory to make that connectivity so that you have the right name servers and can find resources and make that kind of connectivity. So we wanted to add the URLs, the IP addresses, as well as ports and protocols that are used by Office 365. While Office 365 is a cloud solution, it is very much potentially a hybrid solution, like in this SharePoint example, where part of that infrastructure or solution can reside out in Office 365, but again, via reverse proxies or proxies, they can broker that connection through Azure Active Directory and Federated its services with DirSync to access a portion of SharePoint that's actually behind the firewall, where you have a highly customized workflow or development kind of solution for your team. That's really the end of our session. I hope that it was valuable and useful for everyone. I really want to thank you for the opportunity to present today. So SoftwareONE thanks you, myself, Michael, and I'm sure my compadre Victor also thank you. I don't know, Emily, where do we go there?
Yeah, it looks like y'all got to most of the questions in the Q&A. Just want to remind everyone that we will be announcing the contest via the community post link, so keep an eye out for that and a message from me in your inbox if you want anything. Thank you so much, Michael and Victor, for answering all of the questions that we have about Office 365 and Azure and how to wall up your biggest issues. Do you all have any final words?
Mike, are we going to make this presentation available to the audience?
I think that's an Emily question.
Okay.
So the audience will receive a recording, a link to view the recording on demand in about a week. If y'all would like to provide your slides, we can definitely attach those to the follow-up emails. I will just need that information from y'all.
Okay. The one thing I do, or actually the couple things I do want to mention in final comments is when you're talking about Azure, just Azure, aside from Office 365, when you authenticate to Azure, many people are authenticating via a Microsoft ID, a personal account. You really, if it's an enterprise or corporate Azure environment, you want to authenticate with a work account ID. The only way to accomplish that is via some form of federation. The reason why you want to accomplish that is if the person who's doing your Azure Enterprise enrollment leaves the organization, when they get deprovisioned from Active Directory, they'll be deprovisioned from Azure. You want that to happen automatically. So, you don't want to leverage Microsoft ID's personal accounts to authenticate and access resources in Azure. Again, this federation makes that glue. SoftwareONE provides services in a number of different ways. One, to help you with Office 365 architecture, planning, and deployment. Two, to help you with Azure. So Azure, when you put it on an enterprise agreement or enterprise enrollment, will require that kind of federation or organizational ID. When it goes on that enrollment, 2 additional portals get lit up. So if you have experience with Azure, you've been working primarily in the management portal, not the EA or the account portal, where you can set up departments and account owners and control subscriptions. SoftwareONE provides services to help you onboard or activate your Azure subscription, onboard or activate your Office 365 subscription, as well as envisioning workshops to help you envision what that architecture and solution can be, as well as deployment services. So for 365, mail migration, things like that. For Azure, maybe it's not, obviously in the context of this session, it could be identity that you want to put in Azure virtual machines, infrastructure as a service, but also helping assess and discover and prioritize workloads to transition to Azure. Perhaps it's Server 2003 that is end of life, and you need to migrate those workloads somewhere. We can help you assess that and move it to Azure Infrastructure as a Service. Also websites, assess that and move it to Azure Platform as a Service, websites and cloud services. Azure is just such a big offering, and it grows and evolves almost on a daily basis. It used to be monthly, and I was almost able to keep up with it at monthly. Now it's becoming pretty much weekly. I know I said daily. It's really more or less weekly. In January, Microsoft released what they call the G-Series virtual machines. So for those of you that have very, very, very large compute requirements, Azure offers a virtual machine that is up to 32 cores and 448 gigabytes of RAM with 50,000 IOPS and 500 megabit throughput. I can't hear the cheering, but or the oohs and ahs, but that gave me a chill down my spine. That's a big work machine, or a big virtual machine. And then the other thing I want to mention just in final, when Victor was mentioning a dedicated server, that dedicated server can be a virtual machine. It does not have to be a physical server for ADFS or your proxies. So I just want to leave you with that last parting thought. And again, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed being here today.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we'll take
so just to remind.
Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Victor.
We'll take the remaining time to answer questions in the queue. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. So I do want to remind everyone that if your question wasn't asked live, SoftwareONE will be able to follow up with you. Also, if you had to step out or missed any part of today's presentation, you'll be receiving an email in a few days with a link to view the webinar on demand. Special thanks to SoftwareONE for sponsoring today's event, and also special thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in today. We hope to see you back soon for another SpiceWorks Partner webinar. Until then, stay spicy.